Robert Bianchi, visiting research professor at the Middle East Institute. And today it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Wee, who's been working for many years in Afghanistan and Pakistan. I don't often meet somebody who makes me examine my life and wonder if I've done it all wrong and whether I should start all over again and go in another direction. But I have that feeling in his presence, and you might have the same sentiment afterward. So, you know, one of these days if I sort of disappear and you don't see me come in, don't worry about me. I'm just going on to better things. It doesn't mean that I've been kidnapped or hijacked. Dr. Wee has two topics in one, and they're both actually quite cryptic and I think symbolic. The first one about the Taliban or us, and the second about all of us being part of humanity. And I will let him introduce and explain those topics. I have indicated that he's free to speak as long as he wants. He'll tell me when he's ready to stop. Because I believe we have until 5 o'clock here, so there should be plenty of time for questions. Please. Thank you very much.
If you can't hear me, tell me. Thank you very much for your time coming. Thank you, Professor Robert Bianchi, and Ambassador. Thank you for coming. Professor Hudson, thank you for having me. It's, I suppose, most important to start off by saying that I hope this talk will encourage all of us to seek love and truth, to pursue healing and reconciliation by beginning to ask, why not? Today, Middle Easterners and global citizens, including Singaporeans, are standing up for our humanity by questioning inhumanity. We should take courage in questioning everything for the sake of love. Primarily questioning our own lives, but also questioning our society's way of relating to all men, and questioning our status quo ways of governance and economy. This afternoon, I will share with you how Afghans have changed my life, and how I feel that human beings everywhere, including governments and those governed, should be less antagonistic with one another. Why not get along? Some of my friends imagined that after 9 years in Afghanistan, I should have spotted a beard, a long, dark beard, and perhaps a twisted turban. Even carry a Kalashnikov. That is the stereotypical image that you see here. These were some of my Taliban friends in Quetta, Pakistan, who had invited me to do what Singaporeans like best to eat. They invited me to dinner. And yes, there is the beard. Yes, there is the turban. But no, they are not demons. We had a wonderful time of interaction because we were able to relate on a human level. Yes, they had jihadi propaganda on their walls. But I began to ask myself if governments had the right to exterminate them without trial. Is mutual killing what we conventionally call war an effective way to resolve the root causes of terrorism? Well, I had a sumptuous meal and they're very good company. One of them even saw me safely home. No need to worry about crowded MRTs or who the foreigner is. They have become part of many Afghans who have changed my life, like 12-year-old Pashtun orphan boy, Najib. Najib's parents were killed in Kandahar when the US bombed Afghanistan following September 11th. When I saw his empty eyes, I had to grapple with my own emptiness. What was Najib to live for? What was I to die for? We forget that one big tragedy in New York, that after one big tragedy in New York came many small tragedies in Afghanistan and later in Iraq. Najib had to flee to the border town of Quetta in Pakistan. He had to flee from death. He collected cash for a very hard living and lived in a temporary mud refugee settlement. There were an estimated 7.5 million refugees in 2001. What could a conventionally educated person like me do to bring relief to the root causes and problems of refugees like Najib? As a young Singaporean, I regret being subtly haughty about my conventional education. Soon I learned that I had to unlearn what I had learned before and re-examine everything. I asked Najib to bring his surviving grandma to share delicious Pakistani mangoes with me. I asked him to smile for this picture. His grandma was visibly angry and asked how I could ask Najib to smile. She said, Najib has no reason to smile. You see, Najib is Pashtun. Pashtuns are painted as a harsh, fierce, tribal people and are said to fill most of the Taliban ranks. Was it Najib or me? Was it Najib versus me? Was it a Talib, which means a student, versus me? Or were we fellow human beings with similar wishes, caught in very different circumstances? In 2004, I took the opportunity to follow Afghan refugees as they began to return to their homeland and shifted my work to Bamyan province in the center of Afghanistan. Here, Afghans like Abdullah continued to change my life with his simple wish to live without wars. Abdullah's father had been killed by the Taliban, but listen to what he has to say.
We suggest at all that instead of spending millions on war, you can build factories to give us work and a future.
در زندگی خود چی آرزو دارید؟
راستی مرسی.
شما چی فکر میکنید که دوستی و راستی را در زندگی خود پیدا میکنید؟
نه میدونم.
نویسی اما لحظه تشویق شده؟
بله تشویق شده.
باشه.
یک دوست پیدا کرد.
حالی که رفیق شده اما لحظه و دیگر رضاکار رسول جهان، آیا شما با آسانی دلشان زخم می‌رسانید؟
نه.
اگر با بختانه جنگ شروع شد با شما روبرو شده از این رفیقان، آیا اتفاقا شما آنها را میکشید؟
نه. ما باید کرامت انسانی را بفهمیم.
لباس چی است؟ چی است؟
این اوباما خانوادهش.
شما از این رئیس جمهور امریکا باراک اوباما که شخص بالنده نام صلح نوبل است، از او چی خواهش دارید؟
من و دیگر اصحابای من منتظر جواب اوباما از پیغام صلح ما هستیم. Dear friends in Afghanistan and the world, love is how we love peace.
If, like Abdullah, we share the same wish for truth and love, why are we so antagonistic with one another? In this picture, an example of antagonism, we see Iranians killing Iranian political prisoners. Unwittingly, we are hurting one another in various ways, and today we leave that decision to protect, capture, or kill to our governments. We ought to ask why. We ought to hurt for every life lost, whoever the killer and whoever the killed. Is the global Afghan war against the Taliban working? Are Afghans safe? It's telling that a 2007 study by Peter Bergen and Pong showed that the Iraq war has increased terrorism sevenfold worldwide. Also, the Bush administration's own national intelligence estimates on trends in global terrorism circulated within the US government in April 2006 and partially declassified in October 2006 stated that the Iraq War has become the cause celebre for jihadists and is shaping a new generation of terrorist leaders and operatives. With that same reasoning, I tend to suggest that the war in Afghanistan, instead of ending terrorism or making our world safer, is making life for Afghans and for us more dangerous. The conventional logic in a conventional war against conventional armed groups thinks, kill as many Taliban as you can until they surrender or until they negotiate. But the former Taliban ambassador to Pakistan, Abdul Salam Saif, warned against this conventional logic. He said that the Afghan mission was doomed to fail. When you kill 10 people in any village, you create 100 more enemies. Well, Chinese people can understand this, like in this film called Revenge of the Drunken Tiger. We can all empathize that it is natural for any human being to seek vengeful justice for the death of a loved one. This vengeful security crisis in Afghanistan is reflected by a Red Cross report, ICRC report, that the security situation in Afghanistan is the worst in 30 years. That is, even worse than in the time of the Russian occupation, even worse than in the time of the Afghan Civil War and the Taliban. Philip Alston, the previous UN Special Rapporteur for extrajudicial killings, has questioned the legality of the US coalition's drone warfare program. Oxfam and 29 other humanitarian NGOs have recommended against the Afghan war tactics like night raids and the Afghan local militia in reports entitled "Nowhere to Turn" and "No Time to Lose." Likewise, with International Crisis Group, Human Rights Watch, and Refugee International. What we may be seeing increasingly is a political tussle between civilian and military styles and strategies, that is, between consultative governance and forceful governance. But both civilians and soldiers are human beings, as we hear in this interview of US Afghan war veterans Brock and Jacob, who visited the Afghan Youth Peace Volunteers in Kabul recently.
Hi, Brock. Thank you for coming, and the boys have been looking forward to meeting you.
I've been waiting to.
How are you feeling now?
I'm feeling a part of something pretty large and pretty enormous. I remember when I was flying over the mountains here on the way, feeling the contrast between how I felt when I came here the first time, and I was afraid coming here, and I felt immediately alienated from the Afghan people before I even arrived. But this time I felt eager to mingle with Afghans and to listen to them and to grow with them and to build relationships with them, and I feel a part of something very enormous. To have hope and to have patience. The teacher that we had met earlier, I think, put it well when he said that adults will continue to do what the adults do, but the youth make up over half of the population, and they're the ones that are going to be changing Afghanistan in the future. And throughout history, especially in the last 100 years, much of the great changes that happen in societies come from the youth, because they haven't lost their naivety, they haven't lost their innocence, they haven't grown cynical yet. And so stay positive and don't grow cynical, and continue to build relationships with the world.
To be perfectly honest, I feel that the U.S. government might not have the best interest of the people of Afghanistan in mind, although the soldiers are human, and there are charitable acts that come from being human. The ultimate goal does not look like peace. It resembles perpetual war. I would like to say to the Afghan citizens that as a soldier for the United States government, that I'm sorry, for one, for participating in war, but two, I'm ready to complete the mission. I'm ready to do whatever it takes to help bring peace to Afghanistan. And that we within the Afghanistan veterans community will rise for you and will rise with you. Tashikor.
Ali, Abdullah, peace.
Professor Edgar, say something.
Why not love?
Well, my Afghan friends also believe that blood cannot wash away blood. So in Bamiyan, where the Taliban have killed many people and destroyed the Buddha statues, the Afghan youth called for reconciliation by symbolically putting up a peace sign in front of the Bamiyan small Buddha.
تشکر از کشورهایی که در کنفرانس کابل اشتراک کردن و کره مردم افغانستان.
Not calling.
Cara mahabbat na ka.
Sino mahirap?
This is the picture of an anguished Afghan mother asking why. Why did this happen to my loved one? In a way, she is asking the powers why things are so unequal and so unfair, why the people always have to suffer for the powers. Which leads us into our unequal humanity. I thought we will take some time to go through why it is apparently obvious that humanity is coping with the challenge of great inequality. The UN Millennium Development Goals are wonderful goals that have been set up with 2015 as the evaluation point. In terms of poverty, we find that globally we still have one child dying from hunger every 10 seconds. Now, I know statistics go past our heads and it doesn't mean very much, but that really means to us on the ground that we need to think about what happens every 10 seconds. Afghanistan has the highest food security risk index as reported by Unequal in 2010. 42% of Afghan school-aged children do not have access to schools. Afghanistan is the most dangerous place on earth for mothers. It has the third highest infant mortality, and Save the Children has called it the worst place on earth to be born in. It also has the second highest maternal mortality, and studies have suggested that there is a concentrated HIV or AIDS epidemic about to blow up. Less than a quarter of Afghans have really access to water. I have deliberately left out the goal, the UN development goal of global partnership. We have a long way to go. How about the economic inequality that we see in Kabul, with the picture on the left? A good, reasonable house built in the background with the mud settlements, the mud houses that are everywhere. Brazil has one of the best economies in the world, but we can also see the disparity in income. How about the environment? Besides the polar bears in the Antarctica, I think we all have to be a little concerned about the global temperatures rising, possibly in the worst case scenario, by 5 to 6 degrees in the year 2060. Life will then be untenable. We all are familiar with Fukushima and how Japanese residents in Fukushima had to be isolated from one another, which makes us think deeply about energy alternatives. How about the unequal media, where dominating in Afghanistan are stories on war, naturally, and stories on politics, culture, and other social issues are way to the right of this graph. We are seeing people across the Middle East, Africa, and a few European countries, and Central and South America too, they are awakening to demand better social economic equality. Sharif is my friend, and he is an Egyptian public school teacher of Arabic in his mid-30s, married to a village girl, and has 2 daughters. He had told me at the start of the current Egyptian uprising that when he witnessed this leaderless movement in the streets of Cairo, young, old, men, women, Muslims, Christians, everyone, hope was reborn in his heart. You see, he had died to hope, even for his young daughters, because life in Egypt was a trap to him. Sharif is also a writer of short stories. He's brilliant. He's as brilliant as the Egyptian builders of the pyramids must have been. He had exchanged some thoughts with me about President Obama's speech to the Muslim world in Cairo, and I had invited him to visit me in Afghanistan on the International Day of Peace. This was what he wrote. I believe that freedom is the most precious thing in life, and that it is not a gift. For the future, I imagine the scenario which life is writing for us as having a horrible end through a virus or global warming or nuclear explosion. This end can be a slap on human conscience and a step for the evolution of the human race. I mean, we are expendable in these hard times for planet Earth. Maybe when we face the ugliest face of man and nature, we will participate in creating a better world and a more intelligent, humane, and united mankind. I'm optimistic. Don't laugh that this is my optimistic view of life. Can you imagine my feelings when I face loneliness and the fact that I can't move out, the fact that I brought my 2 girls to this world, that the things which tie me down are the same things which I love, and that I'm afraid to get into the window seat of a plane and to see the clouds and the sea and the mountains, and to find you, my best friend, waiting at the airport, and to participate in a noble thing, maybe find new ideas for my writings, afraid of my own people. But the reality is that you are my own people, not them. Well, the still evolving Egyptian strain means that his hope for a more intelligent, humane, and united mankind may be possible after all. I've heard people speak of the Singapore general elections as the Singapore Spring. The ordinary folk and youth of Egypt have sowed our human spring, showing that humanity can peacefully reason with their Mubaraks, with the military, with the police and authorities that premise their rule on unquestioned force. I hope Sharif and his family will be able to see the clouds and mountains and to find me, his friend, waiting someday at Kabul International Airport. Sharif and my Afghan friends teach me that this internal change isn't dependent on money. Singaporeans also sense this deep, meaningless void of pursuing more and more money for future financial security. Yes, we feel trapped like Sharif, but we are not alone. And we can follow their example by doing something to free ourselves, to pursue what everyone wishes for, love and happiness, fairness and truth. And that's what my Afghan friends and I are trying to do. We call this our journey to smile, because change is a joyful thing. That change starts with ourselves. Gandhi had said that we ought to be the change we see in the world. Our story of reconciling civil hearts illustrates this. Afghans feel like they live in a republic of silence. They accept that the rest of the world is too busy or too far away to notice them. But the Afghan youth wanted their voice of reconciliation to be heard so very much that they held a tent vigil for 7 days and nights at Bamyan Peace Park. This is a tarpaulin tent. We slept in it and had our breakfast of tea and Afghan bread, which is naan. On some mornings it was cold, so the water froze in the cups and in the pail. And on one of the evenings, the tent leaked. But this gave us a opportunity to meet with the US ambassador to Afghanistan then, Carl Ickenberry. Abdullah gave our message of the reconciliation of civil hearts and a picture to the ambassador. On the right is the only female governor in Afghanistan, Dr. Sarabi. The ambassadors promised us that he would deliver this message of peace to President Obama's office. As you heard Abdullah at the beginning of the presentation, we are waiting for his response. So why not? Why not listen to one another, to freedom and to forgiveness, to limits and to the limits of forgiveness? The Afghan youth have been building this practically by making telephone calls. Our friends and partners from the United States and in Europe and in Australia have been using technology to call us on our Afghan cell phones. And we build those person-to-person relationships needed to explore what it means to achieve freedom in their lives and in ours.
برای جانمی رضایت نشین آزادی میخواهیم که آنها نباید از ذهن شد قرار بگیریم اشاره تهدیدی جنگ شدن
معلوم اسرائیل و فلسطین باید جنگ نکنم مثلا سور کنم
برای خواهیم روش خواهزا همسا باشه چرا که و خطیگر رفیق شد
عبدالله نفر طالبان پدر شما کشته شما میخواهید انتقام بگیرید؟
نه دیگه باید خونی دستور کنیم دیگه انتقام نگیریم دیگه باز اگر انتقام بگیریم باز جنگ زیاد میشه
فایز برادر شما هم در دست دیگر نفر کشته شد و در دل شما که نگرفتید لیکن فعلا در جهان این دفعه نه معمولا هر نفر که خانوادهش کشته شد انتقام میگیرد پس این فکر چرا کم خلاص شود انتقام گیری
ما نمیتونیم که مثال یک نفر کشته توی یک دیگر رو مشکل نمیخواد چرا که اگر یک کشته بریم دوی دفعه رفت تو بطه نفیش دنیا از باید برد اگر یک رو بطه بریم چون در خون کشته یک جنگ مسئله است باید محبت کنیم دو از اون فراموش شد
باشم Afghanistan.
I speak for everyone on calling solidarity. I know that before it's like speaking. Hello. Good to hear your voice. And I hope that we have all the perspective, good things happen here for all of us. I noticed we also have someone from Israel. Can you go ahead? Why is that? And then from Washington, D.C., go ahead.
Washington, D.C.
fly in Ghana, first fly in the world.
Besides building these conversations with the people from other parts of the world, we realized how important it is to walk the talk. So we had a silent, peaceful walk in Kabul.
We want to live without wars.
Why not? Surely we can converse with one another, converse about our stress, our unhappiness with a well-paid but enclosed flight to the office. In this case, with the picture on the top left, that is a drone facility, or feeling trapped on our little island. On the bottom left is the island of Itoyu in Norway, or our craving for good food and good company. Surely we can converse with one another. The Global Commission on Drug Policy reported recently that the global war on drugs had failed, and their first recommendation was to break the taboo, to pursue an open debate, an open conversation. And here we see a picture of the youth breaking the taboo too. They invited the UN spokesman in Afghanistan to share the pain and comfort of 4 UN staff who had been killed in the northern part of Afghanistan. We looked together honestly at the ugly consequence of unequal power. We discussed our fears of power and wealth corrupting both the Taliban and our governments, because we knew very well that everyone is just as human. We asked, why not? It will then, when we ask such questions, no longer be Taliban or us. Thank you very much.
We have plenty of time for questions. Would you like to just invite your own recognize your colleagues?
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. Some of my friends are here. Thank you, Lion, for coming. Lion has worked in Yunnan in China for many years too. So please do feel free to converse with one another. I would be happy, together with Professor Bianchi, to take some questions.
Well, I have a kind of a political question, because this is a very moving presentation. It's a view of Afghanistan and Afghanis that we don't often see. But I wonder if I could ask you your sense of where things are going in Afghanistan in terms of the projects that we hear about to bring the Taliban into some kind of a coalition government with the existing Karzai government, and whether you think that's possible, or whether it will work, or whether there are forces for peace that we haven't heard about that might actually play a role in this.
Thank you, Professor Hudson. I think Afghans feel that that strategy to negotiate with the Taliban will not work. After 3 decades of war, and in fact before these 3 decades of war, we know, all of us know from the history of Afghanistan, since 1839, they had 3 wars with the British Empire, the first, second, and the third Anglo-Afghan wars, followed by a period of relative stability under the monarch, which ended with King Zahir Shah, following which they had the Russians, and then civil war under Afghan local warlords, and then the Taliban, and now this current 10-year US coalition strategy. In the light of all that, Afghans are not optimistic that negotiating with power mongers will work. The Taliban, those who are negotiating, are interested in retaining power in their various areas, and so are the various Afghan warlords. The international community, I think, is stuck. I think their strategy needs to be re-examined. They need to think about how they are approaching the entire issue. Perhaps it could be, I'm not sure, no one knows, it could be that a good approach now is to stay out of the civil conflict as much as is possible.
When were you in Afghanistan and for how long?
I went to the border of Afghanistan and I had a good few minutes with Professor Bianchi talking about Quetta in Pakistan. That is a border town and called the Twin City of Kandahar. it is in a no man's land, and Professor Bianchi calls it the Wild Wild West or Wild Wild East. So it's been since then that I've been working among Afghan refugees, 9 years.
Since 2000.
2002.
Okay. Right. So you speak Dari or Farsi?
Yes, I do. I am very comfortable with Dari, which is the official language. Dari is Eastern Farsi. So Afghans can understand Iranians and vice versa. They
That
do.
was your voice, Sydney.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, that was.
He was asking.
They do have another language, Pashtun, because about 42% of the population in Afghanistan are Pashtuns.
Under which organization were you there?
Initially, I was working with an international NGO called Global Partners. Currently, I am working with a social enterprise called Sender.
Dr. Young, thank you very much. My name is Omar Ibrahim. I'm from Afghanistan. It's very glad to see you, and thank you very much for all the pictures which you can represent to the world. It was really impressive. I was kind of in tears when I was looking at all the pictures and get me a memory of my country. Although I'm here for 1 year, I'm a student as an MPP in the Kuan School of Public Policy. My questions really, since you have been to Afghanistan and you made lots of friends with Afghans, where do you really see the future of Afghans? Are we really going to success over there, and can we bring peace? Because it's really a dream. It's remained as a dream for Afghans. So if you can kind of input on it.
Well, that's very powerful, Omar. Which province are you from?
I'm from Kabul.
You know, when Omar, as an Afghan, says that peace is a dream, that is what it is to almost all ordinary Afghans. People are losing hope, Omar. I don't think that people expect peace to come. I think that they look beyond their years and their age. They look at the future generations. Realistically speaking, power globally is not in the hands of the people. And if that remains the climate, I share your disappointment and pain with you. I doubt peace will come. Afghans tell me they have no hope that peace will come. But we have to do something. I tell them that, you know, before death, Ambassador Sir in Bangladesh was telling me about his experience in Cambodia and how children, in order to save on bullets, young Cambodian children were hit against the tree to kill them. And the population in Cambodia, according to the ambassador, dropped from 6 million to 2 million. Now, in that scenario, I'm not sure, Omar, if we are doing anything at all. But before death, what do we do? What do we do when we have lost all hope? Now, we talk about finding hope in hopelessness. And then, you know, Afghans come around me and they have taken me as part of their family. Afghans have great hospitality. They say that the first time we meet, we are friends, but the second time we meet, we are brothers. Now, when they sit around with me and talk about the things that they are wishing for and hoping for, and they are realistic about the lack of peace, and that peace will not likely come in the next generation or so, we ask one another what we can do. What do we do when we feel like that? What we can do, Omar, is to begin to make conversations with people. We need to have people speak to us from different places. We need to tell them that Afghans are wonderfully resilient and beautiful people who need a chance. They need to be given a chance. And if people connect enough with us, with Afghans, then perhaps in a very human way, over some generations, we will see the day when violence will lessen, people will be able to live with one another. That is related to perhaps the question that Professor Hudson had asked. Giving that chance to Afghans, we feel, means leaving them alone, giving them a sense of independence. Or if we partner with them, then we should walk with them, ask them what they want. It's so important to be able to know what people want. What do people want? Across the Middle East, I sense that things are happening, and Afghans are excited. In Kabul, I hear about how these young people like yourself, educated, very bright, are thinking about change in the Middle East and how perhaps one day they may have a chance to stand together and ask for peace, ask for a decent life.
Thank you, Dr.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a very inspirational talk, and really thoroughly enjoyed it and was thoroughly moved by it. My question is there any, in your mind, is there any feasible strategy for economic development and humanitarian assistance in the current climate, especially given the profound absence of basic societal security on a daily basis? And if so, what would that strategy look like? How would you envision it?
Afghans tell me that there were decades when they were self-sufficient economically, when they could feed themselves. They are an agricultural country, and perhaps taking their cue, a strategy may need to shift backwards towards an agricultural economy, control the drug economy. Certainly, I feel personally move away from the capitalist model, which is up and springing now. The rich and powerful, usually armed people, have been trying to set up networks, big, huge, what some people call mafia networks. I don't think that economy works. I'm not sure whether it works anywhere in the long term. Maybe it works for a period of time after World War II. If we examine the Bretton Woods Agreement, followed by its offshoot of the IMF and World Bank, I think we've had to think very, very carefully about the purposes behind such strategies and whether that would work in Afghanistan. I suspect not. I think Afghans are wise and good enough to feed themselves and to be self-reliant, self-sufficient economically. We may need to guide them in that direction, or politically, I would say perhaps we may need to give them the freedom to develop that economic strategy, not impose something on them.
I'd like to ask a question about the diaspora in Afghanistan. Because I have a friend, personal friend, who's an Afghan refugee in Germany, and now he's a German citizen. Do you see that that people, the former Afghans are now coming back? And if so, whether they are contributing, or is it a case of this sense of hopelessness pushing people away to want to move to better places?
We are in touch with this group, Afghan diaspora group in the States called Afghans for Peace. And you can go to their website too. We have regular conversations with them. Afghan youth in Kabul, in Bamyan, speak to them on the phone. And they tell us that the Afghan diaspora has, those who have moved away from Afghanistan for more than 20 years, already too far removed and remote from the situation back home to get personally involved. There are people who have come back, and we feel, Afghans feel, that that would certainly play an important role in bringing about positive change within Afghanistan. Whether or not they will eventually come back remains to be seen. Most Afghans living abroad find it tough, difficult to resettle back into Afghanistan given its current insecurity.
Are more people moving away then? Feel like they want to move away?
Yeah, you know, Omar, just before I came back this time, in speaking to young people as well as to adults in Kabul, the talk of town is how to get out. People want to move away, and it's natural. Human beings want to move away from a scenario where they are under threat of being killed. Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Young. As Professor Hodson mentioned, we heard from Omar and Matt, it's a powerful picture. And the narrative you have put together and the way that you present it with the music and everything is powerful.
Thank you very much.
And your repeated question, why not? It's a rhetorical question. Why do I say that? Because you hide the other part of the picture that has been repeatedly told, and we have been repeatedly reminded about the ugliness of this part of the world. As that ugly picture is put together very consciously for a specific purpose, you are selectively painting a different picture. And the emotion that I went through was that, well, this is yet another sensationalizing, dramatizing, and emotionalizing the picture. But then I realized that, well, to come back, to counter the image that we have been exposed to, the only way is to adopt this poetic narrative. Now, the point is that, well, I guess there is no doubt that you have been selective, that you talk to specific people in specific part of the world, and you juxtapose images. While we have bloodshed, for example, in Afghanistan, you show us Iranians killing Iranians, and you talk about Egyptians, while you're talking about Afghan people. So it is well constructed, you know, picture for your agenda, which I agree with that agenda. And my question is that the reason that the ugly picture has won so far is that they have the support, they have the financial, you know, help, and it's the modern media technology that assisted them to tell their story and reap the benefit of it. Your picture is powerful, but among 30 scholars sitting here, we usually talk about theoretical stuff. The question is that how you are planning to adopt that strategy and tell and retell your story repeatedly all over the world to create the kind of consciousness, collective consciousness, that the ugly picture has been able to, you know, elicit and gather.
Collective consciousness. I have asked my friends in Singapore how all this can be relevant. Raising consciousness is really perhaps trying to bring or make another consciousness relevant. Most people have wonderful things going on in their lives and are rushing from place to place, are thinking about daily concerns, and overloaded with information. We go home and Facebook is, well, for the younger people, not my parents who are also sitting here, but for the younger generation, it's clicking every 15 seconds. I'm not sure whether or not the dominant narrative will be addressed sufficiently to raise collective consciousness. I'm not sure. As you have rightly pointed out, the money is not on the side of raising awareness, it's not on the side of an alternative story. We don't hear it. We don't hear it enough. Practically, what we feel is that Afghans can only do what they can with the little that they have. They are facing one of the worst humanitarian indices in the world, and they are the center of a game now. And what we can do is use our phones. It sounds ridiculous. But people call us, and we call people, and we reach out to others. We tell them that the real situation on the ground is very, very different from what conventional media would portray. We can't do anything about the conventional media with the money that is invested in them, but we can make those phone calls, and people can call us. People can, if they are not too busy, they can spend some time, a few minutes, speaking to Afghans and finding out how they really are, what people really want. And I'm not speaking this selfishly for Afghans alone. People everywhere across the Middle East need to be heard as well. That narrative needs to be heard. Maybe Singapore, well, I wouldn't say maybe, I would say that many Singaporeans, I think, grapple with that sense of anger. I met a friend who so happens to have gone into politics now. Politics, being as it does have the tools of media, etc., to use for the good of every country or people. Thankfully, here I think we have certain things in place which make conversations possible. Perhaps this general elections was a little trigger. We ought to engage more and more. We ought to speak more and more. Talk about different things. Talk about why money is not everything. We need to do that. We need to do that publicly.
Thanks, Dr. Young, for your sharing. Pragmatic question. Singapore Armed Forces still send teams to Afghanistan.
Yes.
Right? Should we have a conversation with the government? Are they, from your perspective, are they doing it well? Should they not do it? Do you have any suggestions that you want to put into them of doing this better?
Yeah, well, sitting beside you is someone that I met in Bamiyan who was part of the SAF team, your name is John. John was part of the SAF provisional reconstruction team in Bamiyan, and they, I feel, did a great job in rebuilding projects. They built clinics, bridges, things which the people need. And if that is the direction which the majority of the military force in Afghanistan is taking, I would say that it may play a role. However, the SAF team is caught up in the bigger picture of a US-NATO coalition strategy. And I have personally addressed that with the government. I have sent emails, and I have in the past week met some government officials to express my concern that the current SAF role in this strategy may not be helpful or healthy for Afghan people. Perhaps if I can talk openly, the current involvement which has been announced in the papers, which is in the Singapore Defense Ministry's website, is a team of people working with the Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Program. We all know that that is short for a drone program. The drone are pilotless planes. I was quickly reminded the other day when I met the Singaporean officials that the SAF team is specifically confined to a surveillance role. And I was given the freedom to say that surveillance means gathering information for combat. And Afghans are not coping. They are being bombed from above, raided at night, killed by Taliban, all directions. And I don't think that's helpful. I think it needs to be addressed. It's not easy though. However, the climate in Singapore now may give some opportunities for us to speak directly. I think we ought to.
Afghanistan is a fabulously rich country in terms of natural resources, and there are periodic surveys of the mineral wealth, and every one tops the previous one. And the latest, about a year or a year and a half ago, is just beyond our imagination. The list of minerals that are concentrated in Afghanistan and which are located in abundance there is staggering. Half of, I read the list of minerals and half of them I've never heard of. But the whole world is dying to buy them. But somebody has to dig them out. And somebody has to build the railroads and the roads and the power stations and the mosques and so on. Now, I'm wondering, how can I put this? People in buildings like this and in think tanks and institutions like this all over the world know this. They have the list of minerals and probably can pronounce them. And they can certainly give you an accounting of the future value of the reserves. And then they will admit to you that that future value is certainly modest, undervalued, okay? So my question is, do ordinary Afghan people have any idea of this, the existence of this wealth? If so, what does it mean to them? What would do they view it as their own resource? Also, on a personal note, I'm an international lawyer, and I got involved in consulting the Afghan government of Karzai in the first few years about legal reform. And my task was to help the government of Afghanistan draft a new law for state enterprise reform, and specifically for the control of mineral wealth and natural resources. And one of the few things direct connections I had with Afghanistan and the government was to write a draft of a natural resources law that ensured that it was all the property, the patrimony of the Afghan people and of the Afghan state, and that foreign corporations could not own directly Afghan natural resources. They could have concessions, they could have various contractual arrangements. This was not done in Iraq, but it turns out it was done in Afghanistan. So there is this legal arrangement in place to protect this wealth. There is a long line of foreign businesses and governments dying to get their hands on it, and I'm just wondering if the Afghan people have any awareness of it or any identification with it.
Yeah, Omar, correct me if I'm wrong. Omar, maybe you should answer this question. Yes, Afghans are aware that they live in a mineral-rich country, and they are often suspicious that foreigners come to take away some of their minerals. I'll tell you a little joke. I live in a village in Bamyan, and it's a little village on the hills, and this is the western tail end of the Hindu Kush Mountains. And some neighbors came to me one day and told me, and asked me if I took gold, that I dug gold in the daytime and put it under my room in the evenings. And so they do have a sense that they have minerals, and they do have a suspicion, which is a rightful suspicion, that certain foreigners may take their minerals away, implying that they do sense ownership over their minerals. They are not aware of the economic profit that could come out of that.
And the power.
And the power
that it holds.
The report that you spoke of estimated it to be an industry that would bring $1 trillion a year. Now that to the ordinary farmer or shepherd on the hills, that is not apparent. I would, it's certainly laudable that Professor Bianchi had put in place laws for state enterprise, especially governing minerals in Afghanistan, because in the absence of any law in Afghanistan, even perhaps with the presence of a law, but certainly in the absence of a law, the ordinary Afghan person will not benefit from this industry. There will be corporations that will come in. China has clinched a deal for a copper mine just outside Kabul. Ainak, yes. And the Indian corporations are coming to Bamyan for the iron ores, said to be the second largest, or perhaps even the largest iron ore deposits in the world. We have uranium. Guess who will be interested in uranium?
Natural gas.
Natural gas. Bitumen, which is something, apparently I didn't know this, commonly used in our cell phones and our IT equipment. It's open for the sharks, and I am worried mining industries historically elsewhere have not been very kind to local communities around the areas of mineral deposits, and we are not we're not optimistic or unrealistic in thinking that it would benefit the local Afghan person.
But realistically, Afghans don't expect foreigners to leave their country, do they? I mean, they have every reason to stay there forever, and to expect more to come.
Yes, I don't even think that Afghans want foreigners to leave per se. I think that Afghans, like any other human community, really thrive on friendship, and they enjoy a good tea, chai with anyone from anywhere, and they would take you into their homes and host you. But it's different if foreigners are there for their own agenda, in which case they would defend themselves. We would then call them insurgents, perhaps, or we would call them extremists. We need to change that altogether by sitting down like this and really speaking with them. We could do so much more. They are realistic in not expecting foreigners to leave at all. They wish that the right foreigners will stay.
Well, who are the right foreigners? I'm American. We're coming up on the 10th anniversary of 9/11, and there will be much reflection. We'll probably have some reflections here about the whole operation to get Bin Laden, et cetera, dealing with the Taliban one way or another. I'm just, again, I'm struck by a certain sort of contradiction in your presentation, because you are obviously, you wouldn't have spent 9 years there if you didn't feel really deeply that there is good to be done and so forth, and one would have thought that you must have some kind of hope. But on the other hand, you sounded rather gloomy about the way things are going. I don't want to ask sort of crass political questions, but I will anyway. Are you pretty much in favor, if you were going to advise Obama, would you be telling him, well, first of all, get rid of the drones, secondly, leave? But would you also say to the Taliban, who may be friendly in a kind of one-on-one situation, but have been known to be very brutal in many ways, have been very treated women very badly, so on and so on. Are you thinking that it would be best if they just came back without opposition? And then you alluded, of course, to Afghanistan's history, where in the interludes between some kind of foreign intervention or another, there were episodes that turned out to be pretty chaotic.
Yes.
Periods of, after the Soviets and so on and so on. So I'm just curious, you give us a heartwarming image of Afghan hospitality and a desire for peace and so on. And on the other hand, I detect a certain pessimism. Anyway, those are a bunch of observations and questions, and respond as you choose.
Yeah, I think my hope and pessimism lies in the Orwellian term war is peace. That in the case of President Obama, I would respectfully advise him to leave the country and to have Afghans understand the need to be a self-reliant, independent people responsible for their own security and economic needs. So I would advise that quite clearly The US ambassador at Canberra, the ex-US ambassador, did the same thing. Well, on a slightly different issue about the troop surge in 2009. Just before Obama announced the troop surge, there were secret cables that were leaked out. And Ambassador Ikenberry said, don't send even one more. But politics in the States, Professor Bianchi tells me, is a little polarized nowadays. Obama has a lot to do with. If he had more advisors in a certain direction, perhaps he may have made what I feel, what Afghans feel to be a better decision. Will there be chaos? Yes, I think Afghans expect that there will be chaos in the scenario that the international community and troops pull out. We know that they are not going to pull out. So Professor Hudson, the reverse is true. In the next couple of months, if you would just search online, it's available. An agreement, a strategic partnership agreement is about to be signed. And that is called the US-Afghanistan Strategic Partnership Declaration. And in that declaration, they have stated in no unclear terms the presence of permanent joint military bases in Afghanistan beyond 2024. So Afghans know that. Afghans know that whatever the politicking, whether local or far away in the States, they are stuck with dilemma. That the local civil chaos has become more chaotic, so much more that Red Cross has said this is the worst in 30 years. Oh my! We need to do something about this. I think the gargantuan apparatus that is in place now with 49 countries in the US coalition team is difficult to manage. So Afghans feel pessimistic because they know that things are not going to change practically on the ground, but they also have a sense of hope, as human beings need to. If they don't, people perish. I like to refer to a book by Dr. Viktor Frankl, and he was a Jewish psychiatrist that wrote the book Search for Meaning. He went through the concentration camps in World War II, and he observed as a psychiatrist in his rag and bones state, he was still making some observations. He was saying that hope is, or meaning is everything. He told the story of a roommate, a concentration camp roommate, that wanted to be free from the camp by the New Year. So he wrote, this friend wanted to be free by the New Year. New Year came and went, and they weren't free. So he died a day after the New Year. So Dr. Viktor Frankl recorded that as a clinician, saying that if you lose hope in the face of a pessimistic scenario, you lose everything. You could lose everything. That's my contradiction, and you pick it up.
Thanks, Martha. Just want to ask, you've been there for 9 years. Don't you feel yourself like in danger all the time when you walk around? Is that at all? Because definitely your look is way out of the people around you.
Well, no. If you look at the picture, Omar will tell you that I could pass up as a Hazara.
That's right.
Thank you, it's a privilege.
Descendants of the Mongols.
Yeah, because I was in Peshawar. The moment I stepped into the airport, like there's no pin, everybody was staring at me. Probably people like us, we will stare at the Gurkha, but the Gurkha people were definitely staring at me.
Yeah, well, Peshawar is a little different in its composition. They're mainly Pashtuns.
Yeah.
And Pashtuns are of Indo-European descent, so they are distinct in their appearance. And the Pashtuns will then identify me as a Hazara, a fellow Afghan, but a Hazara. So I walk the streets okay, if that's a question. I'm exposed to the same dangers that Afghans are. I'm not any special.
I like your message of hope, and I also want to bring you to the attention of another philosopher named Ernst Bloch, who talked about utopian thinking. And he makes a distinction between two kinds of utopian thinking, and one is concrete utopia and the other is abstract utopia. And he says that we should aspire towards concrete utopia for real change to happen. And my question to you would be, what do you think is the concrete utopia for
you know, I mix around with, well, I'm always with Afghan commoners. And so, especially in Bamiyan, they're all farmers and shepherds. And, so this idea of utopia is very far away from concept. I would say that human beings just need to work towards something better. And if that something better is utopia, then we move in that direction.
Maybe I should, define what I mean by concrete utopia means to dream realistically, basically, for a better place. And what is a realistic dream then for Afghanistan from your experience?
I think that the realistic dream for most Afghans now is to hope for a window period, a chance, for them to begin to speak with one another, to heal the ethnic differences that has been brought about in large part by continual, perpetual war. And if they have that window period, their resilience will bring them somewhere. It will enable them to relate with one another in their tribal but friendly, brotherly manner, and likewise for foreigners. So perhaps that's the realistic dream. The realistic dream is to build those on-the-ground relationships, which are very difficult. It takes decades, perhaps. The conflict needs to end, or at least toned down reasonably enough for something like what happened in South Africa, and Ambassador will remember those days of Nelson Mandela, with the Truth and Reconciliation Committees coming out and talking very openly about whether I can forgive, and the limits of that forgiveness. Some people will never forgive, and then healing can happen. People can become a community. And community is everything to Afghans. I thought, when I went there, part of my unlearning of education is, Singapore is a city. We don't understand what a community is.
In some sense.
Yeah, we don't. When I went there, that was when I realized that. Before I went there, I had all the theoretical, abstract, utopian community ideas, perhaps. But on the ground, there, living in a village, my Afghan friends are the only people on earth now who will give their lives for me, who will protect me. And that's what keeps me there, I suppose. Precisely.
You see, you come to the university and we want you to define your terms. Utopia, practical utopia, abstract utopia, concrete utopia. You're not going to stay there forever, right? So you come back to Singapore, and you're bored to death. Then what?
My parents are here and they would want me to say that I won't stay there forever.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I'll be bored here.
So what's next? Well, you have your downtime, and then what?
They have opened up my mind, my heart, my life. I can no longer be the same. It would be unfair on myself to try to return to my old days. So I would need to keep this struggle to bring conciliation between communities, whether or not they are Afghan communities, which is a lot of work, generational work, or with places in the Middle East. I go visit my friend in Egypt, Sharif, have falafel together and learn some Arabic.
Gallbladders are a good living. I have friends who are doctors, and they say a new set of golf clubs, and they look at their calendar and they say, well, I need to do one gallbladder this week to get my new golf clubs.
Yeah, I mentioned in my talk.
You left that a long time ago.
Yeah, I did. I did.
What are the 5 C's that you mentioned?
I'm not quite sure. I think it's cars, condominiums, credit cards, cash, and what's the 5th?
Country club membership.
Yeah, country club.
Yeah. Well, I never had a chance to pick up golf, and I had to decide early on that there was more to things. I'm not saying I'm not judging at all, and I must be always personally careful not to sound as if I know about money. I don't. However,
I'll give you my card.
However, change or life, as Afghans have taught me, cannot be all just dependent on money. The poor will always be there, and we can't solve the problems of poverty globally. And so surely the poor people can be happy too. It can't be that they are only successful or happy when they have a country club membership. Well, I put that past me. I hope I can keep going strong. I have to be practical. My parents tell me that it's not cheap to retire in Singapore. So I think I've been kind to them and their goodness to me in reminding me of the practical things I need to do to at least have a roof over my head when I eventually come back. But we can choose to live simply. We really don't need so much. I don't have to put on suits. You know, I had been invited to a talk in Thailand, and this is it was a symposium on humanitarian affairs and work. There were 370 young delegates from 37 countries, so I thought, wow, okay. And before I set off for Pattaya, Thailand, an email came and said, by the way, please come in your business suit and tie, that's the dress code. You know, so I thought, oh wow.
What's a tie?
Not that business suits and ties are a problem, and you understand what I mean. What it means is that we can choose. We can, and I said, well, I am going to dress in a parang trombone. I dress as 30 million other Afghans dress And if you would not have me for that dress code, so be it. They were thankfully very kind, as humanitarian people are.
Can I digress a little from Afghanistan and the Middle East and ask, why do you think we in Singapore do not have that sense of community?
Can I know your name?
Oh, sorry, Faiza. I'm Faiza.
Faiza.
I work here.
I used to think when I was a medical officer rotating through the Singapore public health system, working in hospitals, that my own personal take on this is that the closest group or community I can think of in Singapore is the Malay community. I don't think that it is the fault of people. I think that any city has the challenge of learning to retain their private space, remain in your 3 or to 5 room flat after a very long and hard day, as opposed to getting out in the fields, watching the fields with someone else, and sitting around beside the potato fields. Bauman is wonderful for their potatoes and finding community in a very simple life. I think the physical structures are easier for rural communities anyway. Rural communities in the States, maybe, I'm not so sure, may have a better sense of community than a hectic city like New York. Maybe. I think I enjoy the sort of community that Afghans have given me the privilege to experience. I think Singaporeans need that too. Any person does. We crave for it. We crave for relationships. People feel so empty. I came back. I had the usual Singaporean things: eat, right? So I was invited for meals, and one of the first lunches I went to when I touched down was I came and immediately this very successful ex-civil servant Singaporean told me, this life is just so tiring and empty. There are few people that he finds himself able to talk to without having to meet some deadlines. All this is all part of the fast-paced life. So I don't have an answer for him, but I think if we make choices which enable us to make time for people more than for schedules and money, maybe it will help.
Well, thank Dr. Lee and wish him that he will always find more Afghanistan in his future.
Thank you so much.
Where they are.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.